I'm a real big asshole, and I don't want to be an asshole anymore. So I'm gonna do something different for once that no other YouTuber in the entire galaxy has ever done before. I'm actually gonna talk about the good in some films. So I thought about this idea one day that I want to be somewhat different when it comes to movie reviewers. I don't want to be the typical, I make my one review and that's typically it, and I'll just make like my top movies of the year and worst movies of the years, and I'll talk about things about movies that I like, or I'll have extended discussions. I actually want to take an opportunity to look at the movies that I considered really bad and actually look at the good in them, and kind of come to an understanding of like, how can I see this movie as being decent or fine or good or great. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be real hard to talk about these things, and sometimes I may not have that much to say, and it's definitely gonna be different from movie to movie, but I do want to do my best to like let people know like, hey, there's some things to like about the movie. And yeah, these are things I could have just mentioned in my movie review, but when I do make my movie review, I say what I want to say, and that's really the end of it. I can't really think of a time that I've talked about a movie past my initial review unless it was super important. So this will be another series of content that I do want to make, mainly for movies that I consider were really bad. This isn't going to be like an additional review or a second review. This is purely just going to be what is the good in a bad movie. So let's start with Five Nights at Freddy's 2. If you've seen the thumbnail, you probably knew this is what I was going to talk about. So, of course, I don't really like Five Nights at Freddy's 2 as a film. I think there are a lot of issues with it, but of course, we're talking about the good right now. I think one thing that is really great about this movie that I feel like no one really does appreciate is the animatronics themselves. Now, I'm pretty sure they actually made real-life animatronics for this and for the first movie, and the work they did into them are actually really well done. They pretty much look exactly like the video game adaptations, and I think whenever these movies do eventually retire or they stop making them, like these animatronics can be used in like museums. Like, they really are a great work of art, and I think the team that was behind these animatronics did a really great job. Along with that, I will say this movie does do a decent job of trying its best to be a bit spooky and ominous and all that. Now, for me, it's really hard for me to like a scary movie. I don't really think there's that many scary movies that come out really at all every single year. There's only really a few movies that genuinely gets me, and even then, like, sometimes it's not even real horror. Like, of course, I don't consider jump scares to be anything real or like real horror. It's just one way to get the audience to be like, oh, whoa, what was that? But I will say this movie did do a good job of trying to be scary and spooky like Five Nights at Freddy's is supposed to be. It's supposed to be this creepy, spooky game that's mysterious and no one really knows what's going on with the story and the lore behind everything. So the movie did do a good job of adapting those themes into this. Like, you can argue that the movie was at points creepy, spooky, a little bit anonymous. It may not be to this greater aspect, but hey, they at least did what they could to try to do that. I mentioned in my review that I just cannot find Five Nights at Freddy's scary at all, no matter what you do. So for me personally, it is just impossible for this movie to be really scary unless they go through some deep psychological batshit crazy stuff, which I don't think they really would do because that would alienate the audience. I do want to go back to the people of Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie, and I do want to like give them credit and shout them out because like there are people who do care about Five Nights at Freddy's that make these movies. I think it being made by Blumhouse was a good step because it gives a chance for people to really shine and really show how much they care about this franchise. I can only imagine what this movie would be like if Lionsgate or fucking Warner Brothers were like producing this movie. I will say the people behind Blumhouse typically always do care about their movies at least. And obviously based on who they casted and who they got in this movie, they definitely do care. One thing that I did see a lot of people were talking about when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's in general is that like they don't really want too much when it comes to a movie. And that's something to accept when people watch movies. Like, there's a lot of people who really just do not care what the movie is like as long as it just shows their characters. And of course, I did criticize this whole thing in movies in my review, but to a lot of people, they really just want to see a decent movie with their favorite Five Nights at Freddy's characters. Even if the story is whatever it is, it being made, it being a thing is crazy enough, and that's one thing to even think about. Like, at Five Nights at Freddy's, like, around like 10 years ago, was just this indie flash game. Mind you, it was very popular, but here it is on the big screen, and more people now know about Five Nights at Freddy's, and that jumps into my next point, that this movie did do a good job of, like, introducing the story and the games to everyone, because sometimes people just don't have time to watch videos or lore videos that are hours long. And of course, they can then, after watching the movie, they can then go home and play the game and kind of get an idea of what it's like to play these games. It kind of works its way around, you know? You watch the movie, you go home, play the video games, and that does typically happen a lot. Like, I know for the Avatar 3 that just came out, a lot of people are now playing the Avatar video game. It happens a lot, and it happened with Cyberpunk as well as Fallout. People just sometimes just want to continue their experience inside the video game. So this movie does do a good job of like getting people back into FNAF, you know, looking more into it and watching videos and even playing the games. As far as the story, of course, it is different, and I always do say when it comes to like stories and movies, you don't want to just say the same exact story like that as a video game does, because why even bother? And with this movie franchise, they basically are telling the same story, but slightly different. They're kind of twisting a few things here and there, but essentially the story is loosely the same. And based on where the movie is going, they are going in the same directions as the video games are. So I do appreciate this movie at least trying to, you know, try to meet both places in the middle. Try to like tell a story that's very similar to what people know, as well as telling this new story that makes it worth watching the movie. I can't really know what people would think about when they just go watch a movie and it's like, oh, that's the same thing that I played. And as of right now, that is a lot of the things that I do want to say. I could harp on a bunch of things, but there really just is no point. What I said is pretty much what I consider the good parts of Five Nights at Freddy's, and these are good things you can see in this movie. Now, I'm sure to a lot of other people, there's a whole lot more things. Like, to some people, they really did appreciate the acting, the character, the performances, and the writing and all that. Even though I didn't, some people could. And that's always perfectly fine, which is why I wanted to make these videos. I want to, like, give an opportunity to look back, you know, say, well, you know, this part wasn't so bad now that I think about it. And a lot of people typically do end up doing that anyway when it comes to movies. Whenever people initially watch a movie, they pretty much say what they want to say, but then as time goes by, their opinions of something could change a lot. And of course, that's completely normal for people to change their opinions as time goes. And it could also be a good or a bad thing. Some people could like something but end up hating it later on, or vice versa. So with everything being said, there are some good things to find in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I will say, as much as I don't like this movie, and I will obviously continue to say that I do think it's a bad movie. It's not like the worst piece of crap movie ever. It's definitely not to that level. Like, if I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of other movies that are genuine trash, like actual trash. And just because I gave a movie like a very low score doesn't mean I'm calling this movie, you know, trash. I just think, you know, you tried your best, you did what you could, but you got this low score. But at the very least, you're not as bad as literal like movies that are actual garbage, like War of the Worlds, for example. But maybe we'll talk about that movie and the good in it. So yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 did a good job in those areas. I do think it's worth watching if you're a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, and I do think there's a lot more things you could find in the movie that are good, and possibly a lot more things than me. But yeah, what do you guys think about Five Nights at Freddy's 2 again? You know, if there's anything else you guys appreciated about the movie, go ahead and just leave it down below. Let's just keep it about positivity. You know, whenever we have anything positive to say, let's just go to these videos and talk about it. And anything else, you know, you can still mention it. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to dictate what people do. But, you know, let's just try to talk about some good things in this movie. You know, let's just try to, like, understand the good in it. I don't want to make this like a copium series where I just cope about movies and all that, and I give an excuse for me to just say other opinions or, you know, contradicting thoughts. I don't want to be that. I don't want to contradict myself. I just want to, you know, look at this from a chill standing point, you know? Like, you know, let's just sit back. Let's just look at the good stuff, you know? Let's just focus on what's good. But yeah, that's all I want to say. Everyone, you have a great rest of your day.